Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for a weekly chatty catch-up on my reading. We're talking about what I've been reading currently, what I'm looking forward to reading, what I just finished up, and some random other chatty stuff. So let's catch up on the books. First, I have Anne of Manhattan by Brina Starler. This is Anne and Gilbert Blythe of Anne of Green Gables, directly lifted from that story and placed in modern-day Manhattan. So obviously Green Gables is not on Prince Edward Island here. It is set on an island touristy location, I would say Martha's Vineyard-esque, off of Manhattan, and is a bed and breakfast in this setting. So they're in grad school in modern day, as I said, and that's about all I can tell you here, because this is a HarperCollins title. HarperCollins is currently undergoing a workers' union strike, and I've been trying to avoid getting to any of the titles that I wanted to, but this one has to go back to the library today, so I'm not going to review this as per the wishes of the striking workers, but they have advised it's okay to continue picking up these titles and supporting the authors as long as you're not producing anything that is marketable for HarperCollins in terms of reviews. So this one's going back to the library, and I will let you know what I thought about it once the strike is over. Then I have a nonfiction. This is one of the titles that I had put in a hold during Nonfiction November. It's a fairly new release, and it never came in time for Nonfiction November, so I kind of was waiting and waiting, and finally came in January, and I really enjoyed it. I did listen to it on audio. It's not super long, but really compelling reading, not quite what I expected. So that was Strangers to Ourselves, Unsettled Minds, and the Stories That Make Us by Rachel Aviv. Now, this was a little difficult at the start because I knew it was a collection of stories of people going through major mental illness and psychosis, and the first story is Rachel's own story. It tells us that in the summary on the jacket copy. However, it tells you that it's about a childhood mental illness treatment. It doesn't tell you anywhere that treatment is inpatient treatment for anorexia at 6 years old. So there is some very difficult content, especially if that is a trigger for you, right from the beginning. The whole starting chunk of the book is her being in constantly monitored care for that. So that's difficult. At 6 years old, she doesn't really understand what she is doing or even why. And so it's clear that this is her adult lens looking back and having more perspective. She has some journals and things like that to draw from to really pull out what her intent at the time was. But what she does from that story into the stories of other individuals going through these sort of major psychosis. In fact, the second story is someone who was a doctor himself and had studied psychiatric care and medical care of mentally ill patients. And through all of these stories, she's pulling out that there's something bigger going on with these people beyond just the mental illness. There's something deeper that they are drawing their mental illness connection to. And in her case, it was religious. She initially kind of was set off by Yom Kippur and fasting. And so that was an element. There was also this element of wanting to be someone else, of not knowing she was actively trying to do that, but seeing another girl who had what she wanted, and outwardly that girl was thinner than her. And so it manifested in this combination of two things, of both this ascetic, holy ritual, and she does discuss that throughout multiple of these stories where there's sort of a religious connection to mental illness. How, in her case, asceticism is something that it plays out through multiple religions, where there is a holiness to fasting and this purity to it. And so I don't want to get into, those elements of eating disorder too much for people here, but it was a really interesting take that I haven't really seen explored in modern literature. And she talks about some people who have written about that in regard to like eating disorder community in the past, decades ago, but I don't really see that brought up modern day. And that is something that, it makes you wonder which came first. Were people creating ritual around that because they were disordered, Or was it something that disordered people were drawn to in terms of the holiness? It was a justification. Which way did that go? So really interesting thoughts there. There is also a racial element. She draws from one story where a woman is feeling the effects of systemic oppression while also having this mental illness. And Rachel does such a good job of exploring that her mental illness heightens these things, but it doesn't invalidate that the things that are being heightened are very real, and she has genuine reasons for feeling fear and unsurety in her life, in her day-to-day, because of the realities of systemic racism that affect her and her generational history of trauma due to her race. So just a really well-balanced and nuanced look at these different stories of the hidden connections of people's mental illness and the larger picture of what's going on in the world in their life. So I think that was very powerful. The one thing that I didn't really get was kind of the connectedness of all of this. She does come around toward the end back to her own story and the effect of medicating mental illness and how much we know or don't know. And I think maybe that was really her point, is that this is still such an emerging field, that there is still a ton we don't know about mental illness, and exploring these really lifelong chronic experiences that people have had and how they're trying very hard to resolve those issues for themselves and not fully getting there, and that we are still very much in emerging space in the mental illness fields. But I don't know that there was really a conclusion drawn. So I do think I would really recommend people read this, because it's a really wonderfully drawn portrait of these people's mental illness and their experiences that I think anyone can learn from. But I don't feel like it has a conclusion for you if you're looking for that. It's not going to draw together in any way, really. So yeah, I think Strangers to Ourselves was very solid reading, and I actually think this is the first of the books that are potential options to be in the BookTube prize that hasn't been announced yet as far as what's actually making it in based on the voting, but this was in the super duper long list that we got to vote from. So if so, I'm already saying that I did like it. So one to check into and pick up if you are looking forward to the BookTube prize. Then we have the long-awaited, much delayed Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. LeGuin. This was phenomenal. I mean, it's LeGuin, so it's always phenomenal. Let's start with this as a physical object. So I have 3 copies here. I have, first, this is a tour edition. I think this is the one I like the most as a physical object. I do quite like that cover. It's obviously from external to the planet, looking down at the trees, and it has just really lovely printing. I'm hoping this will come through, but there's a very nice spaced font, and there are almost watermarked leaves on most of the pages. So there's kind of a double title. That was a title page. This is another title page, again with the very faint leaves there. And once you get to the text, the actual chapter text, again, you have the almost watermarked leaves, very nice spacing and font, really like that. And then on the chapters, or in the chapters, you have page markers kind of at the side with a small leaf insignia. So I really like the layout and font of this the most. However, this has none of the extra elements. So then we have a SF Masterworks edition. And again, I quite like this cover. It's got space in the trees here. This one, I don't like the font and text layout. They're very crowded and not very nice. Nothing special about the chapter headers. There's nothing special to the title page. However, this one does have additional information to it. This has a special introduction by Ken MacLeod, and it also has the 1977 introduction by LeGuin herself. So I did read both of those introductions. The Ken MacLeod, it was an introduction. You know, it was a couple pages and very summary, very reflective of LeGuin herself. But the actual LeGuin introduction is phenomenal. And so the one I actually read from is this Library of America copy, which is an omnibus, 2-edition omnibus. This is the 2nd edition of the Hainish novels and stories. So this is very comprehensive. This has the LeGuin 1977 introduction to this story. It also has a 2016 edition for this specific omnibus introduction to the whole collection of the Hainish novels and stories. So there was an introduction to the first volume, and there is a separate introduction to the second volume, which does discuss the word for world is forest. And LeGuin's introductions, all of her nonfiction essays are stellar. So I did add multiple tabs to her introductions, both of them, because she has so much to say. This as a physical edition is very generic. I would say the one pretty thing about this really is this omnibus has a list of Hainish worlds to it in the end papers. The first edition has a map of Gethin, or Winter, the world from Left Hand of Darkness, because that is in that edition, that omnibus. Other than the dust jacket, there's nothing pretty to it. The text is fine. It's serviceable. There's nothing pretty inside, really. It's kind of like very thin Bible paper, but these are super duper sturdy. So I do like these editions, but they're not the nicest as an object. So as far as the story, this is probably my new story to recommend to people who are not familiar with LeGuin. I somehow had not read this particular story, The Word for World is Forest, until now. And I don't know why, other than I have been putting it off because it was the last Hainish novel that I hadn't read before. So The Telling comes after this, and I have previously read that one. So I'll be rereading that when I get to it in this omnibus. But this is a very short, as you can see in these ones, it's just a novella. And it's very dynamic for LeGuin. Her works are usually kind of slow and really thought-provoking. Even if she has multiple perspectives, many of her lead characters, well, for the Hainish cycle, the lead characters are almost always an ambassador. So they kind of have to be not extremely emotional. They have to be kind of stoic and steady individuals to have that role. And so her characters in those tend to be a little bit more withdrawn. And here we actually have 3 separate characters who are completely different. So this is a really unique reading experience for me from LeGuin's stories. I think Rocannon's World is probably the most dynamic after this. It has a really strong action-filled plot, but this one is so action-packed and has such a strong message to it in such a small package that I really love this, and I think it's going to be very accessible to a new reader, to LeGuin, to jump in on. So in this one, we are following multiple characters, as I said, talking through kind of the initial premise is that this is about colonization. We're on a forest planet. Earth has been effectively deforested in the past. We're in a high technology future. So they sail off to a planet where they find trees to get lumber from. And they have a lot of rules surrounding how they interact with colonized planets. But the people there, the loggers and soldiers who make up the human population, don't really follow the rules totally, and they have enslaved the colonized people. Small amounts of them, it's okay, right? And because they can't get their work done if it's just them, or not to the output and efficiency that is really demanded. So we start following this guy Davidson, and he's kind of in charge of a lot of the logging efforts, it seems like. Let's start with science fiction has a trope, or maybe a subgenre, that's very commonly known as humanity fuck yeah, or HFY. Davidson would very much be the lead in an HFY type story because they're all about the awesomeness of humanity. They go out into the stars, and the aliens they find are always very evil, and so they have to wipe them out. And that's the kind of story. So I think this and like Starship Troopers would be a satirical take on that sort of thing. But in this case, we have this guy who exclusively sees this as theirs to be taken. So you're really in this kind of gross lens of a guy who wants power. He goes around seeing things everywhere as humanity's and his personally to exploit everywhere he goes. So he is the inciter of this whole conflict to the story that sets off at the beginning. He has raped and killed a woman who was a member of this planet's colony known as Athsheans, but they kind of derogatorily call them Creechies. And Davidson is just antagonistic about everything because he thinks that, he should have power and that he is always in the right. And so obviously, as he has done this action, that sets off in motion this peaceful people who they've enslaved fighting back. So the second perspective that we get is Selver, who is a member of the Athshean people who were enslaved. It's his wife who was killed. No one thought that the Athsheans could fight or murder or kill. They were completely peaceful. They were very connected with the land that they lived in. And so we're getting Selver's perspective just after he has incited a group to attack and wipe out one of the human camps in somewhat retaliation, but he's kind of going back to his people, and they see him as a god now because he has changed things fundamentally for them. He's brought something new that never existed before, and that's murder. And so there's this whole concept of his people seeing him in this new way because of how they have always existed before, in this knowledge of the waking and the dreaming life. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. Let's talk about the third perspective here, which is Raj Lubov, who is a soldier and an ecologist. He's a doctor of some sort. So his role is not super important other than he's a scientist, and he has made this connection to Selver individually, but also to the Athshean people more so than anyone else there, as these rugged loggers and soldiers who don't really have an interest or care for them. So it's clear from the beginning of his perspective, has been studying the Athshean people, trying to understand them, and has been sending back reports. And we conveniently have a ship, the Shackleton, interestingly, just arriving at this planet to sort of stop by on their way somewhere else. They're dropping off women and supplies, basically. And so it's complicated what they're there for. But there is this delegation who's kind of fundamentally changing and saying, okay, you need to treat the colonists with more dignity. We haven't been hearing the truth from you. And that sets off Lubov because he's been sending reports that have been saying how bad things are in terms of the treatment of the colonized people. And they clearly have not been getting through. So that is, an inciting element for him because he now really wants to make himself heard. And so he starts standing up to others more than he would have previously. And there's a lot of nuance there, I think, to the political, not officially political, but interpersonally political dynamics between him and the soldiers that are over him. So that's really interesting between his dynamics with the other humans. But more importantly, he is the only person who has really connected with these Athsheans in a meaningful way and has tried to understand this dynamic of the dreaming and waking world that they have. And so he becomes the sympathetic character toward them, who's really fighting for, we can't just take everything that we want here. We have to respect them as people. And while they're there, this other group lays down the fact that the Athsheans are, we know now, historically they were descended from Earth, from humans, or the Hainish rather. They were all descended from the same people we were, so you can't treat them as if they're non-human. And so that's laid out. And then, going back to Davidson, of course, doesn't agree with anything that happens or any efforts to say, they're human. There's an argument he gets into about how they aren't really human or fully human. And one of the guys says, well, didn't you sleep with one of their women? Are you thinking that you would sleep with an animal? And, he just kind of shrugs it off. So for him, it's all that sort of not thinking it through with logic and rationale. It's entirely about dominance and dehumanization. So I want to go back to that element of the dreaming and waking that they're talking about. So Selvert is talking to one of the soldiers here. I know what a realist is, Mr. Goss. Lyubov and I talked about these words. A realist is a man who knows both the world and his own dreams. You're not sane. There's not one man in 1,000 of you who knows how to dream, not even Lyubov, and he was the best among you. You sleep, you wake, and you forget your dreams. You sleep again and wake again, and so you spend your whole lives, and you think that that is being, life, reality. You are not children. You are grown men, but insane, and that's why we had to kill you before you drove us mad. Now go back and talk about reality with the other insane men. Talk long and well. So what he's talking about here, I think, in terms of the duality of waking and dreaming, is that the physical life isn't all there is to reality. And the dreaming for them is this ultimate connectedness and our ability to have different perspectives and to put ourselves into imagined things. And I think that there's so much to this that speaks of things that are imminent and happening today, not just in the general sense, but literally today, as we are going through the release of Tyree Nichols' killing videotape by police who have been charged with the crime. And I personally have not watched the video. I'm a strong proponent of not looking away, and have kind of evolved on that from you need to protect yourself as you can, but also I think that in these horrible cases, there are things that other people are living, and I'm fortunately not having to, and I have the choice to be able to look away. And so when I can, I should not do that. I should see the things that are horrible, that are in our world, that people are living with. And this is speaking so much of exactly what we're seeing there, where it was a gleeful lynching that happened. I've read validated, text accounts of what's in the video, and it's horrifying, but it's not shocking, because it shouldn't be shocking to anyone. We have known that this is the state of things for a long time. We have verifiable and validated information, not just rumors or suspicions about the state of policing in our nation. And really, all over the world, there are problems with policing right now. And it's exactly what this is talking about. This story is a story of lack of compassion for others, lack of empathy for others, the dehumanizing of those who you don't understand. And I think this is a powerful story that just really gets across. So I want to read something from LeGuin's original 1977 introduction. The desire for power, in the sense of power over others, is what pulls most people off the path of the pursuit of liberty. The reason Bronte does not mention it is probably that it was never even a temptation to her, as it was to her sister Charlotte. Emily did not give a damn about other people's morals, but many artists, particularly artists of the word, whose ideas must actually be spoken in their work, succumb to the temptation. They begin to see that they can do good to other people. They forget about liberty then, and instead of legislating in divine arrogance, like God or Shelley, they begin to preach. In this tale, The Word for World is Forest, which I began as a pure pursuit of freedom and the dream, I succumbed in part to the lure of the pulpit. It is a very strong lure to a science fiction writer who deals more directly than most novelists with ideas, whose metaphors are shaped by or embody ideas, and who therefore is always in danger of inextricably confusing ideas with opinions. 1968 was a bitter year for those who had opposed the war. The lies and hypocrisies redoubled. So did the killing. Moreover, it was becoming clear that the ethic which approved the defoliation of forests and grainlands and the murder of non-combatants in the name of peace was only a corollary, of the ethic which permits the despoliation of natural resources for private profit, or the GNP, and the murder of the creatures of the earth in the name of man, the victory of the ethic of exploitation in all societies seemed as inevitable as it was disastrous. It was from such pressures, internalized, that this story resulted, forced out, in a sense, against my conscious resistance. I have said elsewhere that I never wrote a story more easily, fluently, surely, and with less pleasure. So she feels she was being preachy, but she was giving us a warning that still rings so true today. And we apparently haven't heard or changed in that 50 years since she wrote it. So if you, like me, are not able to watch the footage of what happened, or not able to read accounts or participate, I would really implore you to go pick up this story, The Word for World is Forest, because at its core, it's showing us the same things. It is a very harrowing and tragic story about these conflicts over dehumanization and people trying to fight back for their own humanity. But I think that that message is extremely timely and imminent for us all to hear. So that is my finished reads for the week. Obviously, it was a mixed and heavy week, but I have some great books coming up. I am currently really trying to finish Sarah Addison Allen's Other Birds. This is my bestseller, and I am ongoing very slowly with my buddy read with Shannon from That So Po of The Best of World SF Volume 2. I also started on audio Waiting for Wednesday, the third in the Free Decline series by Nikki French. So those are what I have in progress. I'm very behind on my to be read for the month, so I will probably carry over most of that into February and make my TBR for February very, very light. I did finish up watching a couple things. I watched the miniseries Inside Man that was produced by Stephen Moffat, and it's only 4 episodes. I think they're like an hour long. Really good, but not what I expected, because the thumbnail on Netflix is David Tennant, so I was assuming it was going to be predominantly him. And it really pulled me in the first episode. So there's like sort of a chunk of rapid succeeding scenes, and the first one is these women being sexually harassed on a bus, and then someone standing up for them, and it was like really, really great scene. And then the second scene is Stanley Tucci. So Stanley Tucci is in prison. He's the inside man. I had no idea. I would have jumped all over this if I knew Stanley Tucci was in it. So he's the titular inside man, who's this genius guy who is in prison for killing his wife, and he takes cases from people. He's somehow got this really nice deal where they let him just see people and accept whatever investigations they want him to do psychologically. So it's that sort of thing where the criminal guy is also helping solve crimes, which is kind of a trope I like. And then the last is the David Tennant character, who is a vicar who gets caught up in this horrible, unfixable situation, it seems, where he's sort of deadlocked. So I won't say anything about that situation, but it's very layered because all of these 3 scenes do come back to connect in some way. And this is really all about the performances, I think. Like, the performances are so good. So it's slow, it's very dramatic, it's kind of like a police procedural, but there's no real police involvement very much. Yeah, so it's got that vibe of those British shows. Like, if you liked Broadchurch, you probably will like this. It got the same level of family drama to it as well, where there's a lot of interpersonal conflicts that in personal relationships that are happening, that sort of thing. But it's shorter, it's only 4 episodes, so it goes through really quickly, this very dramatic situation. So then I also watched Enola Holmes too. Not much to say there if you've seen the first. It's obviously Sherlock's younger sister, and Millie Bobby Brown plays Enola. She's great fun. Henry Cavill, great. It's fun. It was too long, I think. I think it's like 2 hours, and it really felt overlong, but it was fun and entertaining and a good time with a mystery. So yeah, I liked it. It was okay. So I think that's all I watched this week. I watched a couple of random episodes of stuff, but that was it. So a little less than last week. Life has been very quiet, and we were supposed to get a ton of snow. We didn't get that, and it's warmed up. So I've been out trying to walk and enjoy the sunshine as it's above freezing. We are supposed to go back down below freezing, but still no snow. It's very odd this year. We've had 2 real underwhelming snows. Usually we get a couple feet at least, and we really haven't. So we'll see if we end up having a February snowstorm. It will be a little crazy. We do have a book sale coming up. I'm really debating whether or not I want to go because this is the Jewish Community Center book sale. They do it like 3 times a year, I think. And it's smaller than the massive gym sales that I go to, but they almost always have really good stuff, and it's a lot less picked over. So I might try to go. It is weird though, they're not doing a weekend day. So yeah, not that I need any more books. I've been buying way too many, but I may go and be very, very choosy because I do like to support the Jewish Community Center. They're a great space, and they do put on a Jewish book festival every year. So that money does in part go to that. So yeah, I think that is it for my week. It's been very low key. For my recommendations, so 2 things. The first is just a link to a GoFundMe. The author Grace Draven, who writes fantasy romance, very well loved in that kind of space, announced that she had cancer and is basically having to pay tens of thousands of dollars for that treatment. As far as I understand, that has been pretty well verified, so it's not like a highly suspect GoFundMe that somebody's just thrown on for her. But yeah, I just want to share that. If you are a fan of Grace Draven, I'll link all of the information down below. And the other one is a really interesting and not booktube related video that I was randomly recommended, and really enjoyed both that video and started watching other videos from this channel. The channel is Corinne Allord, and the video was about Hazel Scott, the bronze goddess of cafe society. So I had never heard of Hazel Scott. And in fact, that seems to be the case for the person who made the video originally. She hadn't heard of Hazel Scott either. Now it's kind of like a mini biopic type of YouTube video where it's a voiceover to shots of Hazel Scott and clips of her performing. And it's really incredible because she was this amazing performer in jazz clubs and on the screen, and she was apparently the first woman of color to have her own show. She would perform only in desegregated clubs. She really fought for, was an activist for desegregation. And in the video, they talk about her going through inciting strikes on sets of movies where she was a prized star and was able to use her star power to protest and rallied people around the depiction of Black people and get rights for Black workers on these film sets. And it's just really incredible history that has been erased and is not propagated out like it should be about a really incredible person. So yeah, I just wanted to share that video, and definitely check out Corinne Allord's channel because there are loads of videos of a similar type all over. There are so many names and individuals that have had an impact that I've never heard of. So yeah, I will definitely be doing a deep dive into the videos on that channel. So I think that's it for my week. This is going to be a very lengthy video, so hopefully you've stuck with me all this way. As always, thank you so much for watching BookTube. Pretty sure they have figured out my interests. These are pretty exciting. They're, I guess, like coffee hot cocoa bombs. I'm very excited to try this out. You're looking at it. You can try it. Yeah, you can try it. Good girl. Maybe? Maybe? No! Beginnings of the snow. What a classy guy.